Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with modelling our chainsaw. So in the previous tutorials we modelled our chainsaw bars and our nuts and bolts and blade. And on the last tutorial we went through and we sort of had to reconcept our design because it wasn't quite working with what we had. And then we sort of moved the sort of where the chainsaw blade's going to go around here. So if I just unhide, so we sort of did something like this. We still got to figure out what we're going to do with it, but we're going to just tackle that one stage at a time. So we're going to move our sprocket to here because the chain's going to go around here and there. Then the motor is going to drive these parts. So to do that, we can't just have this sort of... We'll need an axle going through here. We don't need to make a hole in this, but we do need to make it so it kind of, if we're making this as logically as possible, we need to have some sort of axle going through there. But it also needs a bearing, and a bearing needs a housing, and that needs a fixing. So in this tutorial we're going to go through and make the bearing housing for this. So I'm just going to go to my panels, orthographic and front, and I'm gonna unhide these and name them bolts, just so I know what they are. And to be honest, we probably actually don't need them, to be honest. Let's just delete them. We don't need them. So I'm just in my front view. I'm going to go View, select my camera, then go Image Plane, Import Image. So I'm just going to go to my file and go to my sword ref, and we should have this bearing. So this is what I'm planning to put on the side. So our axle will go. So this is where our axle will go through. Then because obviously we can't have it exactly like a chainsaw because the chainsaw has what's called like a centrifugal clutch, which we won't have space to put that on there, and it's a bit. We don't really need it. We're just going to have it as when you power it on, it powers on. There's going to be no clutch, so it's just going to be direct power. So it's going to be quite a dangerous weapon, not to use and operate. So we're going to make this, and we've got this image here, and I'm just going to use this. And luckily we've got some sort of measurements on here. So what let's do, I'm just going to go to my polycube. I'm just going to type in 4.7, 4.7 and 4.7. And now we have a cube, which is exactly the sort of full length of this. So I'm just going to select my image plane and change this to like 0.5. Oh, not 5, 0.5. I'm just going to change it to wireframe so I can see around. I'm just going to orientate this. And you know what, that's actually not far off already. So yeah, that's pretty much the correct size. So let's just delete that key. Oh, not D. Let's delete that. Go back to our shaded. I'm going to put my wireframe on shade so I can see through. Okay, so now we've got this sort of design to figure out now as well, because we don't necessarily have to have our sort of sprocket there, but we do need to sort of figure out how we can have this placed. So let's just play around with it, because I don't want to move this blade down, because I still want to cover up the sword. So we may get the chain not perfectly going around there, but but we do need this sprocket. Because if we put it on this side, we could put it on the side like that and tuck it behind. But then this would be at an angle, so we'd need to put some sort of spacers in there or something. But let's not worry about that for now. Let's worry about, let's just get a model, because this is what we're going to use. So I'm just going to hide everything. Just going to turn my grid on. And just going to go to my origin. And we can sort of accept that this is probably not perfectly straight down, but we can get this sort of roughly lined up to the origin. Because obviously there's some perspective on this, so it's not going to be quite right, but we're going to end up modeling some of this just from how we see it. So, like I say, it's always referenced, so we're going to keep it as close as possible. Cool. So I'm just going to lock all these so I don't accidentally move it. I can turn the wireframe off. Then I just need to see what sort of things that I've got here. So I'm going to model this. I'm not going to model this all in one, because I'm going to model the housing, then I'm going to model the bearings separately. I'm not going to try and get this all in one model, because it's easier to do it separately, and it's not all one model anyway. So I'm going to start the housing. So I'm just going to create a cylinder. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, and this is just how I like to work. I like to work with straight away from the models. So let's just do X-ray so we can see through. Just going to scale this down. And we don't need to do the whole thing, because we can just use symmetry. And then there's quite a lot of sides. So I'm going to go to my subdivision axis. Probably go with something like that. Because we've got quite a lot of detail here. I'll probably... So it's good to sort of plan out where you're going to go, because we're going to need to curve around here, So I think that should be okay. And make sure that you're working with an even amount, because that means that we can cut half this off and use symmetry. So at the moment I'm just gonna block this out. Then this one's obviously going to need a lot more subdivisions. So if we change it to 24 and doubled it, because I'm not changing, I'm still keeping it relatively correct. So these are 12 and this is 24, so they're all sort of even. Then I can cut this in half and use symmetry. So I'm going to start with this side. So I'm just going to delete all the faces in the center and delete half. So now I've just got this half shape. So if I go to my perspective, just press F, we can see we've got all this sort of stuff going on. So I'm just going to tear off a copy so I can see it down here, because obviously you can't see two windows. I'm going to keep one perspective and one orthographic. And for now I'm just going to hide these cylinders because I don't really need them. And I'm going to just go to my edges, or you can select edges in your modeling toolkit. I'm just going to select these edges, press Ctrl E. Then I'm just going to pull the thickness out. I'm going to sort of then adjust it, because there's quite a small distance here. So I'm sort of preparing this because we're going to need to add some edge loops in here. So if I actually make sure I snap this down, so that's going to be flat with that. I need to figure out how I'm going to sort of create this. So I'm going to now extrude these ones out. To roughly where it is. And go to my vertices, pull this up. So I actually think I might need another edge loop in there. So something like this. Just so it's not so tight on this edge. Now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to focus on creating this loop around here with just this edge. So I'm going to use Ctrl E. Make sure you sort of readjust your rotations of your edge so it flows nicely. I'm just gonna make these a little bit more even, and also select these, scale in one direction, press W and snap. So I'm just going to continue this. And also we're going to come to this really tight bit here. So I'm just going to bring this in. I'm going to worry about the topology afterwards. I'm just going to try and get this as best I can for now. So I want to at least make sure there's enough rotation in there. And I know it's looking not exactly very pretty right now, but we're going to fix that. As you can see, I'm sort of adjusting all these edges. Sort of fit. Just remember, when you're sort of extruding this down, you don't want to sort of go like crazy. We still have to keep in mind that we've got these edges here that we have to keep track of. So just going around, just tidying up my topology as I go. It's easier if you do that as you go along, because then you have to do it all at the end. I'm just going to select these, go to bridge, I'll press Ctrl G again. And going to Ctrl E on here. Going to use my target world here. Target world to there. So now this is where I've got to figure out how I'm going to sort of join this. So if I've got options here, so let's not worry about how we join that yet. Let's focus on getting this curve down to at least here, whilst sort of keeping a similar amount of edges, because at the moment having this shape isn't the most important part. I'm just going to snap that to there. Cool. So I'm going to bridge these, and I'm just going to tidy this up. I'm going to bridge this. We're getting quite a lot of polygons here stretched, so let's bridge that one. So now we come to the point where we have this sort of dilemma where we've got not enough edges, and I could bridge this here and add an edge loop here, but I don't really like having that there. I don't like having a pole there, because when you smooth it, I like to keep all my poles like these sort of, if I was to do another one of these here, I'd make sure that it's kind of more in the middle. So I'm actually going to add an extra edge loop in here, and this will probably work out better, because then we can get this a nice sharp tip. If we bridge that, just G again. And now let's tidy this edging up. So I'm actually going to move this five-sided, this vertice that has 5 edges going into it a bit up here. I'm actually going to push this a bit further. And you see how I'm just sort of making this curved. You don't necessarily have to do this because it's a hard surface. You can get away with really bad topology, but if you're showing this to recruiters or something, you want to show your best, so you kind of want it as nice as possible. And I'm just going to add, probably unnecessary to add another edge loop in there, but I just kind of, I'd rather make sure that this is on a flat surface, so it doesn't do any sort of weird stuff with my model. I'm just going to go around and have a look, see if there's any. So I can pretty much spread this out evenly now. And you kind of want to do this because if you're particularly looking to get a modeling role, you need to show your topology for sure. If you're sending show reels and you don't show your topology, chances are unfortunately your reel probably won't even get looked at, because it's just when you're trying to get a modeling job, you need to show your topology, because there's a lot of sort of like, I guess, ZBrush sculptors, which then they're great modelers, but then if they can't retopologize or anything like that, or have the correct topology to work with, it's they kind of won't get hired. So it's really important to make sure you understand topology, and not only that, it really does help with quite a few departments as well. and it's part of good practice. Cool, so we've done that side, and we can just scale this so it's completely flat, and we're happy with that side. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to delete these faces for now, just so it's just a flat plane. So now I do need to figure out what I'm going to do here, because this is quite a complex shape now, because we've got this bit stepping down, and we also need to continue the extrusion down. So I'm just thinking whether it's best to... Yeah, right, okay, let's select all these edges, deselect these. So you should only have these outer edges selected. First of all, let's just press 3 and just double check that we've not, before we go too far into extruding stuff. So just press 3 and just check that it sort of all looks okay. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So just going back to my edges, deselect these edges. So I just double clicked on that and it made an edge loop. So I'll bring this big up. So I can just press Ctrl E to extrude. Just press W, and I can just push this out on that axis. Let's turn our X-ray off. And because we've sort of flipped it, we're working the other way around, we can go mesh display in reverse. So we want to kind of just get a rough, there's not a huge, sort of a huge edge there, so we kind of, I'm just going to select those edges again. I'm just going to push it out so it's roughly there. Don't forget it's going to smooth, so it will shrink a bit as well. Yeah. So now I've extruded that, I'm going to do one more extrusion. And this will be our sort of final thickness, so we can worry about that actual final thickness a little bit later. So if we now look at this view and go to our faces, let's select all these faces to there. Let's do a very small extrusion. We can sort of see what we're doing in our perspective, but it's not particularly great because we still have to adjust these. So I'm just going to select my vertices here. I'm just going to pull these down. So something like that. So at the moment we have this sort of edge. Let's press F and center on that. So if we press 3 now, we can sort of see we've got this edge, and it's sort of working here. We still need to push this down, but we're getting this sort of soft fall off around the edge. So let's just go to our fronts and our orthographic. Let's just make sure our topology is all nice. Let's bring this down a bit. Cool. So we've now done that, and if we go to our perspective, we don't want to continue extruding on this one. So select again and extrude. I'm just going to push this out like that. Then we're going to start sorting out our topology. So whilst I'm doing everything, I'm just always checking that nothing weird's going on. So I probably can push this up a bit. Obviously we're going to get some odd stuff happening here until we smooth it. And we've obviously got a pole here on the edge which might cause issues, but let's get the shape done first. Cool. So our next thing is let's bring back one of these cylinders. So we've got this big cylinder here. And this is going to help us sort of figure out how we can attach or create this. So even though we doubled it, we've still got a lot of edges here, which we still need to figure out. So probably going to do some awkward pauses halfway through this as I figure it out, because this is the first time me doing this as well, so I haven't practiced this, so I'm probably going to make mistakes. So let's double that. And we can match that edge there, that edge there, that edge to there, that edge to there. And let's try that. So I'm just going to go to face, delete all that, and I'm going to delete half of it. I'm going to go mesh, combine. So that's a mesh, delete the history. I'm just going to now go to my edges. Obviously we've got this huge thing now. So I'm just going to select this edge and snap it to there. Select these edges, snap it to the back side. Then I also need to select these ones and go to my mesh slate and reverse. Cool. So because we've been extruding this, we've got these faces. we delete these faces. Let's not worry too much about the back side of things. We can we'll delete those a little bit later. So now also make sure you delete these bottom parts. In fact, what we'll do is let's delete these back parts because we don't actually want them. So I'm just going to go to my edges, select the edges, and bridge them. Cool. So I've just bridged those edges. I'm going to go to my orthographic. And for now, I'm just going to spread these out evenly. We don't want to change these because these are keeping our perfectly round shape. And now what we need to do, we need to sort of figure out what we're going to do here. So I'm just going to go to some edges again. And we're going to do something similar, but first Control E. Just push that out. Just going to slide this down. Cool. So I don't actually want, because we have to sharpen this, so we'll have to extrude it again, I think. Otherwise we're going to end up with funny stuff on the edge. So it's fine because we need to add another, I was going to add another edge loop in here anyway. I'm just going to go to mesh, edit mesh, sorry, and merge to center. And so we've got this edge here. There's a lot of problem solving and stuff like this, so sometimes it can be a bit sort of, you have to rack your brain a bit, but so let's select this edge, Control E again. Let's bring that out. But this time we want to put that up there and have that continue like this. And if we use our target weld, make sure you've got that deselected. It's where it starts, can start to get a little bit crazy, where we have to try and figure out what we're going to do. So we might have to add another edge loop in here. It's going to probably break, well, it won't break it, it will just mean we've got to be very careful how we add, that we continue this, because if we add an edge loop in here it might kink it, but I don't think we'd ever see it at this level. So let's figure this section out. So I'm just going to go to my vertices and I'm just going to try this. I'm going to target weld to here. I'm going to target weld this to that. So now what we've got this sort of kite shape. What we can do is add an edge loop there. Add an edge loop here. Cool, so let's try and smooth this out so it's not so lumpy. This is where it gets tricky because now we've got some quite nasty stuff going here on the edge. I'm not sure if I like that, so I'm actually gonna delete this. I don't particularly like how that's actually going. So I'm just going to Control E on here. And I'm going to add an edge loop here. Hopefully it won't make too much of a difference to the cylindrical shape. At first, let's get this all nice and tidy, because sometimes you can see where you need, if it's like a mess like it was just now, sometimes you can't see where you need to go. Select these two and bridge that there. Still got some select the edges. So what we've done, we've just changed the edge loop to come back around here. And that feels a lot cleaner now. We've still got a kite here. But we can see. Well, if that's causing big issues, we'll take a look at it. But I don't think it will be too bad. So I want to make sure that I actually make sure that this is evenly spaced. Otherwise I might get a kink, but to be honest I don't think we'll ever see it. This sort of piece of it is going to be so tucked away you may not even see it, but it's on the outside of the model, so I'm still going to do it. So if we look in our perspective, you can see we've sort of created this round bit here, and now we've got this full circle piece. So I don't want to model all the way around, I'm just going to delete half. And this is 12 millimeters from the, I'm guessing that's probably to this part as well. No, I'm just going to select my edges. This is where it might get a little bit weird because we're now extruding an edge which already has faces, so it might not actually let us do this. I thought I deleted you. Just select that edge. Control E, push this edge out. Obviously we've got some really strange stuff going on here. You've got some flip normals because we need to get rid of these edges. Delete that. If we press 3, we can see we've got the flip normal problem here. So if we go to our polygons, select them, let's go mesh display reverse. Now we can see it's all working nicely. I'm just going to delete these edges because I don't actually need those yet now, really. because I just want to be able to see my main shape. Cool. So we've sort of got a pretty good shape. So now we need to figure out this sort of size. So did I? So I'm actually going to make a cylinder. I'm just going to, probably should have done this at the start, but let's assume that's the full length. So height 12 millimeters at 1.2. And I'm just going to probably, it's got to be about half, right? I'm not too worried about getting it the right exact size. I just want to get a guesstimate. So I'm going to select all these edges. Let's delete those ones as well. So you have to be very careful of what you're extruding at the moment, because you don't want to accidentally double extrude something. So if I double click now, it will add the entire edge loop, which I don't particularly want. So sometimes you just have to select things manually. So I've selected all those edges. Don't need to select those because they're going to be captured in the sort of duplication. So I'm just going to Control E. I'm going to try and get a rough guesstimate on how thick this part is. It does look quite thick. So I'll probably say something very similar to that. And now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to use this as a, let's push this back because it's right in the way. Or in fact, because I've locked it, let's push all this forward. Press insert, I'm just going to change the pivot point of this to here. So now we can sort of see how roughly how thick this thing is, and it might change our sort of idea on how wide it is, or how thick it is, sorry. So I'm just going to select all those edges again, deselect all these back ones. So you want to make sure that you're not selecting things that you don't want. I'm just going to roughly guesstimate how thick that is, because this isn't poking out that far, so I would say that's probably poking out somewhere about there, which means that if we look at this sort of scale resolution, this is way too small now. So if I just hold all my vertices, and I'm just gonna, because what I'm doing, I'm kind of guesstimating the size based on things that I know. So I know that this is 12 millimeter. So if I actually go panels, orthographic, top. And I'm just gonna, so that I feel that this is probably a reasonable distance, because don't forget this sort of inlets in as well. But the relationship between this part and this part is off. So let's bring that up. Like I said, this is a lot of guesstimation, so that's a lot thicker than I thought it would be. Let's push that back slightly. I'm just going to select all these vertices. Just slightly bring that up. So now we're sort of getting a pretty decent shape of it. pull that up. I still think that's a little bit. And like I say, you can stick into the reference, going to be the best bet. But at the end of the day, it's what looks good. So let's go back to our front. And we can adjust this once we've done the whole thing, because it might look completely different once we're done. So I'm pretty happy with that. So next thing that we need to do is we need to do this inside bit, but there's no point doing that, because if we do that, we still have to sort of stitch it. So at the moment, let's freeze our transforms, delete our history, and center it. I'm just going to change my pivot point by pressing insert. And I'm just going to bring the pivot point so it's in the center. Then I can Control D and just flip it in the Y. And I'm not worried that if it doesn't match down here. I'm going to select these and go Mesh, Combine. Go to my vertices and select them all. Then go to Edit Mesh and Merge. So every time I do a merge, I kind of like to press 3 to double check that it's actually merged, because you'll know if it hasn't, because there'll be holes and all sorts of horrible stuff going on. Cool. So that's working nicely. So now I'm just going to press insert again. My pivot point, I'm going to hold V and snap it to this edge. Now I'm just going to Control D and minus in the X, and we've now flipped it in that side. And you can use all this, like, you can use the symmetry tools, but I kind of like to, everyone works a little bit different. It's I don't know, I like to, I can visualize it in my mind a bit more. Some people might want to have the symmetry on. I should probably show you how to do that, but so if I select this, I can get to symmetry and object X. In fact, I need to do a mirror symmetry. I'm just going to do it how I use it, because I just prefer doing it that way. Cool. So now we've now duplicated this. Now I'm just going to go Mesh, Combine. Select my vertices in the center. Doesn't matter if we over select. Edit Mesh and Merge. And because they're on top, we don't really need to change. So I'm just going to press 3 and double check my perspective. So we've got this really nice shape. It's working really well around here. And it seems to be going pretty well. Apart from, I have just noticed that we do have this small rim around here. So let's select all these faces. Press Control E. And we're probably going to have to do this tiniest amount. And that should add a nice little, it's a very soft lip, so, but once we're finished with this, we will sharpen that up. And now we obviously need to select these faces around the top, because we used the extrude, and just delete them. So I'm just going to select these edge, press Control E, and I'm just going to scale it in on this to sort of match it. Then Control E, all the way down. Probably going to hold V and snap it to the end there. Cool. So we've got a pretty good bearing now. Or bearing case, sorry. You can probably hide this, we don't really need that, it's just getting in the way. So we do need to sort of sort this back out. Just trying to think the best way we can do this. We can reuse stuff, but first of all, let's Control E on that, because we're definitely going to have to sort of so that's minus 0.05. And what we probably could do, we could probably duplicate some of these polygons, but there's some stuff on it that we probably don't really want to duplicate. So I'm just going to select these edges. And in fact, what I'll do, because I don't want to do it twice, I'm going to delete all that side. And I'm going to select these edges. Just deselect those inside ones because I've already extruded them. Because either way, we have to at least have at least one extrusion on either of the sides. So let's try and keep it relatively the same thickness. Then an extrusion here. Cool. Now we can start to figure out how we're gonna close this up. So let's start at the simplest points. And select the edges. Bridge that. So now we've got these extra edges that we have. And we can see what it looks like if we add another edge loop. But let's just do these really simple parts first, because if we need to add an edge loop, it will just automatically follow the flow. So just do that. So we're getting there. And the only thing stopping us right now to add another one here is this sort of loop here. So let's see what happens. So because we've got everything in a nice edge loop, it does actually go around a lot. But luckily for this is going to be a side that we're probably not going to see a great deal. So if I set the edge, bridge that. And what we can do is add. So if I don't want to bridge that. What I want to do, I want to bridge this one afterwards. So I've pressed G again, but I want to add a division in there. So what it's done, I've just sort of redirected that edge loop. I can double click those edges, hold shift and fill the hole. And what I could do, I could just continue to do that. Control E. Just that would go out of the way, that's kind of annoying sometimes. And as I go around, I'm going to switch between my target world just weld these points. whilst also trying my best to keep my topology nice and clean. I'm probably going to have the same problem here in a minute. So just Control E. Go to my vertices, target world, make sure you've got nothing selected. Sometimes you have to sort of rotate round. It doesn't quite find it. Cool, so we're getting pretty close with that. And like I said, we don't have to do it all the way around. We can do it up to here, delete it, and do the same thing as we did before with the duplication. So don't worry about doing it all the way around. Sometimes I just like to go that far ahead, so then you can visualize it and sort of then just you can delete stuff. It's really easy afterwards. So let's figure out how we're gonna tackle this. So in theory, we could continue this edge loop around, or have an edge loop go around here, because we could sort of make another kite here. Like I say, we're not going to see this backside at all, really, but we might see like little bits of it where we have to, because obviously the blade isn't perfectly flat, so where you might see it, it's definitely worth sort of modeling it. So let's try and figure out where we get, so we can add an edge loop there. And I think that will probably work. So I'm just going to actually just extrude this edge. Select my vertices. Get a target weld this vertex to here. Then go back to my edge. Then I'm going to bridge this edge. Double click on here, hold shift and fill hole. I've now made another sort of edge loop. And you can see we've definitely got some sort of kink here, which we need to try and resolve. Obviously there's going to be some strange stuff going on here, but this will probably, a lot of this will be lost in texturing, so let's Control E on that. So let's Control E, and let's use this as much as we can. Because I still might change that. I'm not too keen on having this here. This isn't so bad because it's one edge away, but this is a bit nasty. This is not great. We can definitely make this better here for sure, I think. Trying to figure out how we can do that. So let's just concept some edge loops. So now we have moved that edge loop off the edge. probably going to work out a little bit nicer, but we've obviously added way more. But if we smooth this now, you can see we've got no problems here at all. We just now, I guess, move the problem, but it's fine. So what we can do, I'm going to hide this, go to panels, orthographic, new, back. I'm going to turn my X-ray off, so now I can see on the back, on the flat view. Before I go any further, I'm just going to nicely tidy up this edge flow. I'm not sure what to do with that one yet, but we'll get to that. So now we've got this nice edge flow. This is good, like I say, you can get away with a lot with hard surface modeling. If it's a super shiny texture that's going on it, maybe not as much, but in most cases you can have. I've seen pretty bad topology on some people's models. It's one thing you won't avoid. There'll always be, yeah. Sometimes not, like, don't believe that when you work for a company, or sometimes you just don't have time to go through and do this all properly, so you definitely take shortcuts sometimes. I would say this is mostly, you want to make sure that it's good for your show reel, for sure, 100%. Like, it will definitely show that you can do it properly, but there are cases where you're on a job and sometimes you just got to do it quickly, and sometimes things get sacrificed. And if it looks okay, don't worry too much about it. If you're not going to see it, don't worry about it. Don't go too crazy about the whole topology thing. If it's good, obviously, for your show reel, do it. But you find that most things are probably just bought off Turbo Squid or kit bashed from previous things, so it's tricky because you want to model stuff, but it's not always the case. So I'm just going to extrude these down. I'm actually going to scale that down to flatten that off. We've got a lot of mixed topology here, but it doesn't, to be honest, we're never really going to see this. Extrude this down, just scale it, and select my vertices. Just use the target weld. Oh, make sure you've a bit of a pain. Sometimes the target weld, it selects things you don't want, which is not so great. Why it's always a good idea to always check. Don't spend like a lifetime in your orthographic. Because I bet you even I've done it. I do it sometimes. Yeah, move things and it's you've gone wrong somewhere. So it's always good to keep an eye on your perspective as well. So let's try and make this as nice as possible, this topology, because we've got some kind of crooked stuff going on. But we're going to follow this around. That's looking pretty good. So like I say, we don't have to do the whole thing. We can just select our faces, delete half, and now we've got this whole section that we've modelled. Completely sort of airtight, so if we press 3, it's probably good to do this at this stage, press 3, and just look for any holes. Obviously we haven't done the edge sharpening yet, but we just want to check, because we don't want to duplicate it over and over and it kind of being a bit gross. You want to make sure you've done as much as you can before the duplication process. Even if it's just, I feel that this is going to be a funky bit here, so we'll probably have to use some fencing here instead. But I think that's fine as it is. Cool. So let's duplicate this. Let's delete our history. Let's undo that because I just moved the pivot point. So I'm just going to Control D. Going to do -1 in the X. Then I'm going to select both of these. Mesh, combine. Go to my vertices. And I'm just going to edit mesh and merge. Oh, did I get the right one? Just merge, yeah. I was worried there was a vertice there, so always check. Change the distance threshold. Cool. And after you merge, it's always a good idea to sort of press 3, smooth it, check there's no holes, and it's fine. So I press W again, freeze, delete the history. Then just press Insert, hold V, and snap it down to there. Then I'm just going to Control D and minus it in the 1, and now that's flipped it down there. So now I'm just going to select both these, go Mesh, Combine. Select these edges here, vertices, edit Mesh and Merge. So if I press 3, let's hide that, don't need that. You can see it's all nice and watertight, but like you'll see if you haven't got it merged properly, you can see, oh, where's it gone? We can see we've got some sharpness here where it's not merged and it's not continuing the smooth, so it's just stopping. So keep an eye out for this. And if we just select all these edges, mesh, edit mesh and merge, go to our object mode and press 3 again. Now you shouldn't have any sharp edges at all. Cool. And if we just look around the whole model and double check, and that's pretty good. So we've got this far, so make sure you save it because you don't want to lose anything. So we've done this now, so we need to bring back up image plane. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at some of this things that we can start sharpening. So on this top one, it's the easiest one to do, so we can select this and we can probably bevel it. It looks quite soft. It's quite soft edging. So maybe something like this. So if we press 3 on that, we can see we've got this. Well, actually, when you look at it, it's soft on the outside, but it's quite hard on the inside. So maybe if we deselect that, bevel this first one, the outside first. Let's get that nice soft edge. Feels like 0.25. And now what we can do the inside edge where it's much sharper. 0.1. Press 3 on that. You can see now we've got that soft edge and the sharp edge. Probably not quite that sharp. So let's go back to there. Change 0.15. That feels a bit better. So a lot of this stuff is actually quite soft around the edges already. So we seem to have actually tackled a lot of our smoothing edges already with just how we've modeled it. I might, apart from this edge here, because we're going to have problems beveling it, we're going to sort of fence it with a multi-cut. So I'm just going to hold control and make an edge loop around there. So now if I press 3, see we've got a nice tight edge, but we need another edge around here because I don't want to bevel around here or anything to do with here because that would make some nasty stuff here. So I'm just going to do that here as well. Now if I press 3, get to object mode, because you know I've created that nice edge that sort of matches around here, and it's not affected anything else. I seem to have somehow told you I'd do it, pulled that vertice and made it look like there was a lump. So I expect that's on every single one. Yeah. Well, almost that, like a flawless victory, but not quite. I did move something that I didn't want to. I'll get there one day, whereas I'm not making mistakes. But cool, so if we press 3 now, everything's nice and smooth. I've got that nice round edge. Oh, even this bit in here, it's quite nice. So let's add another multi-cut in here. Because they're not hard edges, they're quite soft, so we're quite lucky in this case. So I'm just going to add another one here. And probably just going to add something here as well, just because, why not? So now if I just go to my and I feel that's pretty good. I think we've achieved what we need to achieve with this. I'm kind of feeling, looking at it now, I feel that this may be a little bit too shallow. So let's pull that up to something like that. That feels about right. So I think we're pretty much done with the sort of outer casing. The next thing would be this sort of bearing. What we can do, let's unhide that. Let's get perspective in our large view. Turn off. Let's hide that. No, let's I'm just going to leave that there because I want to continue modeling, and I'm just going to play around with the idea of how this is positioned. Ooh, upside down, that's probably why it felt a bit weird. So So we've got this big bearing. It's actually super wide. So, like, as we're going along, we will have to sort of reconcept a lot of this stuff as well. So, to make this as sort of realistic as possible. So I do want that up there. I don't know if that's... So what we can do, we can have attached to the blade here. Because obviously we've got this gap, we can stick some spacers in there or something, or have... Because it's the sort of interesting part about blocking this out as well. Because obviously if our chain needs to be something like that. So we're going to be a heck of a lot, a hell of a lot wider than just sorry. So let's just randomly sort of have a look at this and see how this is going to go. Attached there. That means it's going to be very wide. So, because we've obviously built this at real world scale, we could probably change the scale of that so it's not so big. So if we undo that, now we only have to pull it out ever so much. I think that's the furthest that we'd have to go. So I think that's alright. We have to figure out some spaces and some stuff going in between here, but I think generally that's probably fine. So actually delete that. Let's hide that. Let's continue with our bearing. So this last bit is going to be pretty simple. So we've got this inner part, and this outer part, and a little screw. So let's make a cylinder. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. You can scale this up. Just going to turn my X-ray back on so I can see. And just for sake of keeping it the same, so we did 12, first one, then 24, that wasn't enough, so then we did 48, so that matches the same as this. It doesn't have to match, but it just makes it easier for everything to fit nicely in place. So let's have a look how this actual bearing goes together. So if we look at that, sort of an inner and an outer bit. So we're not going to do it all separately. We're going to, well, we'll do some of it separately then. We'll do the metal bit. So I'm going to go, I like to break things down into sections. So we've kind of got the shiny metal bit, then this darker metal, possibly plastic bit. So we're just going to model this to the metal section. So you can't really see it. Well, you might be able to. There's a tiny little bit of metal here, and this bit, and there. So luckily with the polycinder, we can just add a height division, subdivision cap. And just going to keep adding that until it sort of fits nicely. Perfect. What do I want to do? I just want to. Yeah, no, that's fine. Had a little brain meltdown then. So we can actually select this edge and then let it go. I'm actually going to select this edge. Sorry. And delete that edge. Do the same for the one below. Delete that edge. And I can delete all the stuff in the middle. Cool. So now we've got this sort of bearing shape. Actually, I need to. I won't extrude those out. If I look at this, and that's two parts, I think that's actually part of the actual casing, but for this, I doubt we'd ever really see it, and it's probably going to be so dirty in there anyway when we actually go to texturing it, I won't notice. So this is noticeably, maybe, I don't think it is smaller, thinner. I think maybe we just can't quite see it. So I'm actually going to select these first and extrude that. Got a nice little extrusion there. Then I got select this edge and extrude that up. Probably about the same. Cool. I'm just going to hide this. So in fact, looking at that, that's ridiculously high poly for what we need. So I'm going to undo that if I can. Hopefully I'll be able to undo it as far as changing the poly count. It just seems a bit crazy, actually. It's a bit unnecessary just to sort of keep it the same. So yeah, I can't go back, so I'm just going to make a new one. It's just a bit excessive to make it that high poly. So what I'll do, I'll just press 3 on that one, so we can see it's moved, and we can go to, what was it, 12, 48. 24, sorry. And that's so we can hide that in there a little bit. Then you go to our subdivision caps. Just keep going until they sort of match nicely. I'm just going to delete those ones. Delete the middle ones again. And obviously, we don't need these, so I'm going to hold Control and delete. That means that I'm deleting the vertices as well, so it's really important that you do that, otherwise you'll leave vertices, like loose ones, and it's going to cause you problems in your model. Cool, so now we've got these edges. Let's go to our face. It's hard to tell. It looks like this is thinner here, but it could possibly be the fact that the plastic's thicker there, but that's, you know, keeping it as close to the reference is key to sort of keeping things real, so let's not go back on our reference, so I'll just actually just pull this here so it's easier to see. I'm just going to select these edges. You can do it on both sides. I don't have to use symmetry for this, I can just select them both. I can just pull it out like that. And just going to pull this in. Somewhere like that. So it doesn't matter so much on the inside. We mostly want to focus on. We might not even see this at all, but you might want to model some bearings and stuff for something else. So once you've modeled, like, let's say, like, this is not just for this one model. This could be used in other things for your other projects if you need it. So when you're modeling stuff, it's always good to sort of think about maybe modeling it to the point you might have to reuse it. So I've just selected both those edge loops and press G. Now that's bridge there. So now I'm just going to select all these edges, and because this is like perfectly cylindrical, I'm just going to use bevel. So I'm selecting all these edges. I don't need to select that edge. This one here. So all the edges I want sharp. Make sure you don't miss any, because then that makes your bevel go a little bit strange. So let's bevel this. Let's do 3 segments and let's bring it down so it's really nice and not super sharp, but sharp enough to be sort of cut metal. So now if I press 3, and see here we've done something very strange. So I've probably selected some edges that I shouldn't have. So always keep an eye out for selecting any sort of edges that you shouldn't. So I'm just going to bring this down, do the same thing again. Object mode and press 3. Just double check that it's not doing anything weird. I'm going to slide this in. And I'm just going to freeze it delete history and center the pivot. Just go to my front view and my X-ray. So if I make sure that's centered with that, this is centered. So if I select this first, then my bearing ring, I can go to rigging, constraint, point. See how that's slightly shifted it over. Now that's bang in the center. So I just want to have a look at it in big screen without wireframe and without this in the way. And I just want to see if there's any sort of gaps or anything, and it should be fine. Cool. So we've done this part of the bearing. We can do what I like to do is, because that's a separate material, I like to reuse stuff. So if I just Control D to duplicate, I can hide my original. Let's select all these faces, then go select, inverse, and delete. I can select all these and press Control E and extrude that out. So now if I unhide that, I've now got this plastic bit. So if I pull this Control, if I select all these edges, you could probably do this in texture, but for the sake of modeling, it's kind of nice to sort of model as much as you can. So I've just press 3. So we've got some nice sort of breakup in there of this plastic bit. You can scale it up slightly if you want, so it's a little bit tighter to the edge. I think that's about good. So we're almost pretty much done. Next thing is just do the center bit. So let's bring back that image plane and go to our orthographic front. This is not a complicated part. This is well, actually, we have a hole here. Do we do the model the hole in? Let's not worry too much about that. So let's go create polygon primitives and go to pipe. We can rotate this around. 90 degrees. And go to our polypipe and we can change our radius. Let's change our thickness to 0.4. Maybe 0.5. Ooh. So let's just scale this up to sort of get this roughly correct. And I'm just going to change this so it's roughly the correct thickness, or what looks nice. So this actually comes out quite a long way. So I think that's probably perfectly acceptable for what we need to do. So we have now this screw on the side, which we can add that hole in if we want. We probably would never see it. To be honest, we're never going to see that screw. We're probably not going to see a lot of this, but for the sake of modeling, we'll do it. But yeah. Cool. So let's tidy this all up. So bearing, housing, geo, bearing, geo, bearing, inner, geo. So yeah, we're pretty much done. I'm happy with that. We're not going to see most of this, so I don't want to go into we've gone into way more detail than we ever really need to, but it's a nice little bit of modeling. So we're done with this, so let's just name it bearing inner geo. Sounds actually bearing inner. I think that's cover or something. Cool. So let's group all this. Let's freeze transpose, delete the history, Control G, and bearing underscore GRP. Oh. Cool. So let's unhide our chainsaw. We can hide that. Let's make sure it's centered. Let's revise this sort of sprocket blocking. So we've got our bearing thing here. And let's roughly place this. Yeah, but the sprocket's going to be a bit bigger, so we probably like let's concept like every iteration. I'm probably going to reconcept this because I just want to make it like it would be if I was making it. I know it sounds crazy to do that, but it's more fun, I think. So the one thing that we've got to sort of figure out is there's definitely this gap here. Let's hide this sprocket blocking. We don't really need that because we can sort of see where it's going to go. So maybe if I have like something like this. I know it goes off the blade. We can drill, imagine if we drill the hole there. So I'm just going to quickly concept this. This is just I like to do this every sort of round. So the next modeling step, we're not modeling stuff that we don't really need. It's just kind of nice to see it coming along. So maybe you have that. So that's really close to that, so I don't think that's going to work, so we do need some sort of space. What we'll need to do is we can probably make use of this whole, I don't know how much we want to do that. Because if we've got the chain going around here, sprockets going around here, we could always change the size of this. Let's see what happens if we just... If we scale this down a little bit, we could then effectively have it there. And I know we're changing the scale of things, but I think generally we can get away with scaling things a little bit as long as we're not doing anything crazily, like ridiculously stupid. I think we should actually scale it now, sort of. So, no, if we had enough space, we could. But we're working with a tight space here, so. I'll tell you what, let's decide when, because I kind of like it if it would go down, but if I change this back to 1, I kind of like the idea of it, a bolt going through here and joining through the middle, but let's hold on that for now until we get the sprocket. But yeah, we're pretty much, because we've made it so much wider now, so I don't want to change the thickness of this because this is when it starts to get a bit like you lose the sort of realisticness. But we're doing a chainsword, so we might have to figure out what to put in the middle. Because we don't really want it that wide. Let's have a think. Maybe we make a plate going on here. Just like a chunk of metal. I like being able to see through that gap, but yeah. Anyway, we've done this bearing. We'll figure out what to do with it next. So yeah, so if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.